Welcome to Liesl's Artistic Studio. If you are in the mood to paint something simple and relaxing, then you are in the right place because today we are just going to have some fun while we paint this loose spring floral spray. Now, you're welcome to use whatever paint brand, paint colors you have, but today I'm actually going to be testing out a new watercolor tube set put out by Meiliang. This is a fairly new product that they're featuring. In fact, you may have seen in some of my past videos some of these fun little pan sets that I use by Meiliang. I really enjoy these as my on-the-go travel sets, so I'm kind of excited and a little bit curious to test out how their tube paints do. One of the first things I noticed when I opened up this set of paints, which may be a little bit small to see in this video, is that the tubes have not only the color names listed, but also the transparency of the paint, as well as some stars for weathering resistance, along with a couple of other features. Now, when testing out a new brand or set of paints, it is a good idea to do a quick color swatch so you can get a good idea of how the paint reacts, the transparency, and especially the hue of each paint, because even though the tubes show what the color is, sometimes that is only an approximation of what the actual color looks like. However, to save time, I'm not going to try out all 36 of these colors today. I'm just going to pick out a few that might go well with the flower painting that I have in mind, like some blues, pinks, maybe a purple and a yellow, and some greens. Now, with this particular paint set, each tube is actually sealed off and closed, so you need to puncture the top to get the paint out. Here in the top part of the lid, you'll see a sharp cone or needle-like shape that you can use to push through or puncture the casing to open the top of the paint tube. You do need to be cautious with doing this. Sometimes the tubes can build up pressure or they're just really full so that as soon as you puncture it, the paint will start oozing out. I just say this so that you're not surprised if that happens. I'm going to go ahead and puncture the tops of the ones I'd like to test out and just get a little pea-sized sample of each color to play around with. I like to put my colors out in a way similar to the color wheel just because that's what makes sense to me. Now that I've got my paints out and ready, I'll quickly write down the names of the paint colors in the same order as they're placed on my palette onto this little piece of watercolor paper so that I can know exactly what colors go with what name. I'll use this test paper as a reference when I begin my flower painting. All right, let's pull out some water and really quickly test these colors out. I'm going to do 2 strips of the color, one a little lighter in value and one a little darker and more pigmented, just so I can get a good handle on what they might look like when I start to paint. I like the look of the colors so far. There are definitely some that are more transparent than others. That's not necessarily good or bad, just something to be aware of. And as a quick side note, these paints are on a flash sale on Amazon right now. This is only going to last through March 24th, 2024. It's a limited time deal for only a few more days. I have some links for this listed in the description of the video if you're interested. All right, I'm really going to put these paints to the test now while we paint together our pretty floral spray. Let me refresh my water and grab my watercolor paper and we can get started. Now, even though I'm going to freehand the majority of this painting, keeping it simple, fun, and loose, I have drawn the main 3 flowers in the center. These are not anything fancy or complicated, and you really could paint even these flowers freehanded as well if you'd like. Or if you'd rather, I will put an outline sketch on my Etsy shop. But let me quickly go over how I drew these if you'd like to try drawing the outline for yourself. I started with the center of the flower first, basically a squiggly or jagged circle shape. And then I will start forming the petals around that center. I don't have a specific number of petals. In fact, I think all 3 of my finished flowers have a different amount. I'm just drawing them nice and plump. The outer ends may be a little bumpy or asymmetrical for some character, and some of the petals may even have a slight curve to them. But you can see these are not complicated, just an ordinary flower shape. Then when you're ready to draw a second or third flower, you'll draw it in the same way. But this time I'm going to have the first flower overlap the second one a little bit to help keep my composition close knit. But again, I'm keeping it simple and I'm not worrying about all of the petals looking exactly the same. Then of course you can draw as many or as few of these flowers as you like. I've drawn 3 of them nice and close together. Now I'll just tape my paper down and we can get started. And as a side note, any of the supplies you see me using today, along with my Etsy outline link, will be listed in the description of this video. I've got 2 brushes I'll be using today, a large and a small. This is Artegeria brand number 10 and number 6. Okay, let's start this painting off by painting these main flowers first, and then we can see what we might feel like adding after that. I'm choosing to paint this first flower a shade of pink. The particular name for this in the set is called Rose Red, but first I'll wet down the petal with water and then I'll start adding in the color. I like to show my palette of paints while I'm painting, but I didn't realize that the purple and pink colors here were cut off in the video while I was recording this. So I do apologize for that. I'll try to be as clear as possible as to what colors I'm using or mixing that you might not be able to see. Now, as I add the color in, I'm sort of focusing it along the edges first, and then using a little bit of extra water on my brush to spread some of that color through the rest of the petal so it's a little bit lighter in value. I am trying to keep the darkest color closest to the center of the flower, and I think it might also be fun to add a tiny bit of orange yellow to just a part of the petal as well. Not too much, I don't want the petal to turn orange, just a slight amount to one side to give it some variety. I'll do the same thing to the next petal, and this time I might even add a touch of some watered down deep violet to the side opposite of the yellow. This darker color will emphasize the look of shadow. I should also mention that because this painting is meant to be more loose in its look, I'm not worrying about my petals blending together a little bit if they touch. In other words, I'm not waiting for the petals to dry before I paint right next to them like I have done in some of my other tutorials. If you do want more crisp and clean lines, you can wait until they dry and that will help separate them. Now, since these next few petals are actually going underneath these other flowers, I'm going to paint them more of a dark pink-purple color. Now I'll move back again to the lighter colors, the pink with a splash of yellow. If you're enjoying this tutorial so far, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any new and upcoming weekly tutorials. Now, even though I didn't test out this color yet, I'm going to add a touch of black to my tray that I will use for the centers of the flowers in a few minutes. Moving on to the second flower, I think I'll paint this one yellow. I'll paint it in the same way as before, with water first and then the color. The color name for this is orange yellow, and for more of a dark or shadowed look for these petals, I'll mix up a little bit of this orange yellow with a tiny bit of some purple pink, aka violet red, to make it almost a brown color. Now, even though I don't mind if the petals blend together on the individual flowers, I am going to wait to paint the petals that are touching my first flower until the first flower is dry because I don't want the two different flowers to bleed into each other. On this yellow flower, I'm trying something a little different that I kind of like, where I'm leaving a few spots white without any color. This is actually adding a little bit of texture to the petals. Now, I'd like to point something out really quick. As I painted these last petals, they did create a bloom onto my first flower. A couple of reasons why this may have happened is because my paint maybe wasn't completely dry on the first flower yet, or it's also possible that these paints have a more reactivating quality to them, meaning that when the color gets wet again, the paint can be pushed around or even lifted off. This is not necessarily bad, just important to be aware of. For example, I may not do a layering type of painting like the one I'm posting here in the corner because I might not get those crisp edges creating that transparent look. But on the other hand, if this paint lifts off well, doing a bokeh effect might work really well with paints like this. For this third flower, I'm going to go with a mixture of purple and blue. To be specific, the deep violet and Peruvian blue. For the shadow or darker areas, I'll use those same colors that are just slightly more pigmented, and I may even add a small touch of black. I'm enjoying testing out and using these paints. The colors are bright and pretty, they paint on nice and smooth, but they are more of a student grade quality. I probably will stick to my professional paints, but if you're a beginner or you're just starting out or wanting to give watercolors a try but don't want to spend a lot of money doing it, this set is definitely a great option. These paints are enough to give watercolors a good test without breaking the bank. Just to add a bit of variance on this flower, these two petals here, I'll try throwing in some of the violet red that we were using earlier. And for these petals that underlap the other flower, I'll paint them nice and dark. When all of the flowers have completely dried, let's paint in the center using the smaller brush and some black. I'm just dabbing in this area with little dot marks, leaving some white spaces in between here and there. Again, nothing too intense or complicated, just some loose blobs of color to fill in the empty space. All right, now it's time for what I think is the fun part of this painting because anything goes. We're going to add in some leaves and small branches that shoot out and surround these flowers. This is where your creativity and artistic ideas can flow. You can follow along with me in the design, color, and shapes, or you can try something totally different. The choice is up to you. I am going to start by using the larger number 10 brush for some bigger leaves and a variety of colors. I've started with a mixture of olive green and Prussian blue for a darker blue-green color, and I'll just add a few organic leaves to each side of these flowers. Now let's switch things up and move over to the smaller brush and change up the colors a little bit by adding in some leaves that are more green and maybe even yellow. I'll probably also try to paint some leaves using lighter values as well so they're not as visible. And as a side note, you may see me adding in some two-toned effects to a few of these leaves. All you have to do to achieve that look is paint a base color for the leaf, and then while that paint is still wet, add in another color to bleed and blend into the first. For these leaves up here, I've actually made them slightly brown in color by mixing olive green with a little bit of rose red. Then in this little empty space, I think I'll make a loose shape of a flower bud with some of the yellow orange. I think that's enough of the larger leaves. Let's add in some little branches with smaller leaves now. When creating a composition, a good rule of thumb is to try to have big, medium, and small shapes. I had a college professor that would say, same is boring, boring, boring. Adding in different sizes creates more interest in your painting. So here we have the big flowers, some medium-sized leaves, and now we're adding in the small leaves. I'll use more of the pinks, purples, and blues for these, such as violet red, deep violet mixed with a touch of Prussian blue, and maybe some pure Prussian blue, as well as a variety of values, dark and then light. I think it also might be fun to add in a few thin grass lines here and there using some of the olive green. Now for my finishing touch, I'd like to add in a few splatter marks, but before I do the quick small ones, I'm going to paint on some larger ones first that are more methodically placed using yellow, blue, and maybe green. Then after I've got some of these larger dots on there, I'll do some more sporadic splatters by tapping my brush loaded with color onto another brush. I'm using this spare piece of paper that I drew on earlier to cover up the large flowers in my painting. And here is your simple and loose springtime floral spray. I'm glad you joined me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, please consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.